Late in 1944, the world was teetering on the edge of a monumental change. Across the war-torn landscapes of Europe, the Allied forces were pressing forward, wary yet determined, fueled by the hope of ending a conflict that had consumed millions of lives. The German heartland lay ahead, its cities scarred by years of relentless bombing, its forests and rivers standing as natural and fortified barriers. The race was on not just against the enemy, but against time itself. From the east, the Soviet forces advanced with relentless momentum, and from the west, the Americans, British, and their allies pushed ever closer to Berlin. Every day mattered, every decision carried weight, and every mile forward could determine the fate of nations. Amid this high-stakes environment, the Western Front became a theater of both opportunity and peril. The Allies were not only fighting to advance, they were racing to be the first to reach Berlin before the Soviets could claim the city. The urgency was palpable. Supply lines stretched thin. The harsh winter was approaching, and the enemy, though battered, remained cunning and resourceful. It was a time when courage and strategy were tested like never before. Troops knew the path ahead would be treacherous, yet they moved with a shared purpose: to end the war and restore hope to a world scarred by tyranny. One of the most unexpected and grueling obstacles lay hidden in the dense forests near the German-Belgian border, the Hürtgen Forest. To the untrained eye, it was just a stretch of thick woodland, but for soldiers stepping onto its soil, it became an entirely different world, a green hell where every step could conceal danger, and where nature itself seemed to conspire with human defenses. Trees stretched skyward, forming a near-impenetrable canopy that blocked out sunlight, muffled sounds, and hid well-prepared German positions. Mines, machine gun nests, and bunkers were carefully concealed, turning the forest into a fortress of extraordinary complexity. For the Allied soldiers, it would become the longest, bloodiest, and least known battle fought on German soil. This story is not only about strategy or tactics. It is about the human spirit under unimaginable pressure. It is about soldiers facing fear and uncertainty, officers making split-second decisions with lives hanging in the balance, and communities on both sides of the conflict enduring the costs of a war that demanded everything. In the coming chapters, we will explore the incredible courage, the tactical challenges, and the shocking human cost of the Hürtgen Forest campaign, a story that history almost forgot, yet one that deserves to be remembered. If you want to uncover the untold stories of courage, resilience, and strategy that shaped this pivotal moment in World War II, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Stay with us as we journey into the heart of one of the most harrowing battles of the 20th century. As the Allied forces pressed deeper into Germany in late 1944, one of the most formidable obstacles awaiting them was the Hürtgen Forest, a dense and foreboding stretch of woodland that seemed to stretch endlessly across the landscape. Located just east of the German-Belgian border, this triangular forest spanned approximately 140 kilometers, a vast natural barrier that had long been shaped and managed by the Germans. On the surface, it appeared as any forest might, trees rising in rigid lines, undergrowth weaving a tapestry of greens and browns, but beneath that canopy lay a meticulously prepared labyrinth of defenses that transformed the Hürtgen into something far more dangerous than a mere collection of trees. For the soldiers stepping into its shadow, it was as if they had entered a living fortress, a place where every branch, every shadow, and every hidden incline could conceal life-threatening danger, and where the forest itself became a weapon against the unwary. The Hürtgen Forest had been carefully fortified for years, its preparation a testament to German military foresight and the looming dread of invasion. From 1938 onward, long before the Allied forces would ever consider pushing into this region, the Germans had transformed it into a section of their western defensive line, known to the Allies as the Siegfried Line. Bunkers were camouflaged under the dense canopy. Machine gun nests were hidden within the natural folds of the terrain. And carefully placed minefields turned every step forward into a gamble with death. Unlike the open fields and towns the Americans had already encountered, the forest allowed the Germans to strike and vanish, using both the element of surprise and the forest's natural features to amplify their defensive advantages. The tall, straight trees formed a rigid structure that blocked lines of sight for advancing troops, muffled sound, and made it nearly impossible for artillery or air support to operate effectively. Tanks, which had often served as the backbone of Allied advances, found their progress slowed or completely halted by the sheer density of the forest, forcing infantry to move forward under relentless threat without the cover or firepower they might usually rely on. For the American commanders, the decision to enter the Hürtgen Forest was fraught with uncertainty. Yet the strategic logic of the moment demanded action. The Allies were racing against time, desperate to reach Berlin before the Soviets could claim the city. And the forest lay directly along the path that would allow the Americans to secure critical objectives further east, including the Ruhr River dams that controlled vital waterways. General Courtney Hodges, commander of the First Army, understood the dangers, and his staff, including his trusted advisor Lieutenant General Joe Collins, debated the best course of action, weighing caution against the pressing urgency of the campaign. Despite knowing the forest would be a gauntlet of death and confusion, the decision was made to advance, in part to pin German forces and prevent them from reinforcing other areas further north, and in part to demonstrate that the Allies would not be deterred by seemingly insurmountable obstacles. As the first American units entered the forest in September 1944, the reality of its deadly nature quickly became apparent. The 9th Infantry Division, comprised of battle-hardened regiments that had already endured the deserts of North Africa and the hedgerows of France, now faced a different kind of trial. The forest's natural camouflage concealed the enemy, turning even a short advance into a perilous endeavor. Mines hidden beneath leaves and dirt detonated without warning. Machine gun nests opened fire from concealed positions, and the undulating terrain forced soldiers to advance with limited visibility and unpredictable footing. Radios frequently malfunctioned or were rendered useless by the dense foliage, leaving units isolated and reliant on hand signals or messengers to communicate. Even as men moved forward with disciplined precision, the forest seemed to conspire against them, each step carrying the threat of ambush or hidden obstacles that could decimate a platoon in moments. Yet, despite the relentless danger, the soldiers pressed on, motivated by both duty and the knowledge that every gain, no matter how small, was a step toward ending a war that had brought unimaginable suffering across Europe. The town of Schmidt became an early focal point, a crossroads whose capture would allow the Allies to fan out into the surrounding countryside and secure vital communication routes. Every engagement within the forest was a grueling test of endurance, strategy, and sheer willpower. As troops maneuvered through natural choke points and fortified German positions that had been constructed to maximize the forest's defensive advantages, casualties mounted quickly, with every day of combat claiming dozens, then hundreds of lives, as the dense canopy and unforgiving terrain turned even simple movements into acts of extraordinary bravery. In this environment, the Hürtgen Forest revealed itself not just as a battlefield, but as a character in the story of the campaign, a silent, imposing adversary that demanded respect, courage, and relentless determination. Its trees were not merely obstacles, they were partners in the German defense, amplifying the effectiveness of machine guns, artillery, and mines, and transforming every maneuver into a high-stakes gamble. Soldiers came to understand that survival depended on constant vigilance, careful planning, and trust in their comrades, as the forest punished hesitation and rewarded daring moves executed with precision. The human cost was staggering, Yet through the relentless struggle, moments of heroism and solidarity shone through, creating a tapestry of human endurance set against one of the most challenging landscapes encountered in the entire European campaign. The story of Hürtgen is not simply one of geography or military tactics. It is a testament to the intersection of strategy, nature, and human determination. It demonstrates how terrain can shape the course of history, how leadership decisions ripple through the lives of thousands, and how ordinary soldiers confronted extraordinary challenges with courage and resilience. It reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the spirit to advance, to endure, and to persevere can shine through, leaving behind lessons that extend far beyond the forest itself. As we continue to explore the battles, the tactics, and the stories of those who endured the green inferno of Hürtgen, we gain insight not only into military history, but into the profound human experience of courage under fire, determination in the face of insurmountable obstacles, and the enduring impact of landscapes that shape the course of war. As the Hürtgen Forest loomed ahead, its dark canopy stretching endlessly into the horizon, the responsibility of leading the American advance fell squarely on the shoulders of General Courtney Hodges, commander of the First Army. Hodges was no stranger to the crucible of war, a decorated veteran of World War I. He had seen firsthand the devastating toll of battle and understood the weight of command in situations where every decision could mean life or death for thousands of soldiers. His experience had taught him that patience, discipline, and meticulous planning were often the keys to survival. Yet in the autumn of 1944, the strategic imperatives pressing upon him demanded a balance between caution and urgency that would stretch even his considerable talents to their limits. Hodges knew that the forest ahead was unlike anything his troops had previously encountered, and that navigating its dense, treacherous terrain would require more than sheer numbers or firepower. It would require adaptability, insight, and the ability to read both the terrain and the enemy with almost prophetic clarity. By his side stood Lieutenant General Joseph Lightning Joe Collins, a man whose reputation for rapid action and keen tactical instinct had earned him his unforgettable nickname. Collins had distinguished himself in earlier campaigns, demonstrating an uncanny ability to assess battlefield conditions and push his forces forward with remarkable speed, often turning hesitation into decisive advantage. Where Hodges brought experience and measured judgment, Collins brought audacity and a sense of momentum, insisting that the army could not linger, that delay would give the Germans time to fortify and entrench further, and that only through immediate reconnaissance and swift action could the Allies hope to maintain the initiative. Their relationship was one of complementary forces. Hodges, careful and strategic, tempering the pace and structure of the army, and Collins, energetic and forward-thinking, compelling the troops to press onward despite the foreboding dangers of the forest and the uncertainties of the campaign. Together, they formed a command partnership that reflected both the immense challenges of the Hürtgen campaign and the unique personalities required to navigate them. As September of 1944 arrived, the First Army prepared to enter the forest, its ranks composed of battle-hardened regiments who had already endured the harsh sands of North Africa and the hedgerows of Normandy. Hodges was acutely aware that these troops, though experienced, were facing something radically different. The forest's dense canopy and intricate terrain would render many conventional tactics ineffective, and the usual advantages of artillery and air support would be limited by the natural cover. It was a setting where small unit leadership, individual initiative, and the ability to adapt in real time would determine survival. And Hodges knew that the success of the campaign would hinge on the delicate balance between maintaining discipline across his sprawling formations and allowing the flexibility necessary to respond to the unpredictable challenges that the forest would throw at them. Every battalion sent forward was an extension of his strategic vision, and every movement through the forest carried the potential for catastrophic losses if mismanaged. Collins, observing the terrain and the disposition of the enemy from the edge of the forest, urged immediate reconnaissance, arguing that hesitation would cede the initiative to the Germans, who were already using the forest to their advantage. His philosophy was that momentum was the lifeblood of the campaign. By moving quickly and decisively, the Americans could unsettle the defenders, identify weak points, and exploit them before the enemy had the opportunity to respond. In practice, this meant that forward units would often encounter enemy positions unexpectedly, probing for openings, skirmishing under fire, and adjusting their movements based on real-time observations. Collins believed that even when faced with dense woods, mines, and hidden bunkers, a force that maintained aggressive forward pressure could gradually impose its will, and that bold, well-coordinated action could offset the disadvantages imposed by the terrain. Hodges, while mindful of the risks, recognized the merit of this approach, understanding that the overall strategic context, the race to secure Berlin and critical objectives such as the Ruhr River dams, demanded a balance of caution and daring that could not be achieved by retreating into the familiar routines of planning alone. Together, Hodges and Collins orchestrated a strategy that blended methodical command with daring initiative. Units were instructed to advance steadily, secure key positions, and gather intelligence on German fortifications, all while navigating the forest's treacherous environment. Hodges focused on ensuring that lines of communication, supply, and support remained as intact as possible despite the forest's natural barriers, while Collins pressed for rapid reconnaissance patrols that could identify vulnerabilities and keep the German defenders off balance. The tension between these two approaches reflected the broader challenge of the campaign: to advance into a landscape that favored the defender, where every step could conceal mines or machine guns, and where misjudgment could lead to devastating casualties. Yet the synergy between Hodges' experience and Collins' energy provided the framework within which the troops could operate, combining structured oversight with the flexibility necessary for soldiers on the ground to make split-second decisions in life or death situations. As the First Army penetrated deeper into the Hürtgen Forest, the roles of Hodges and Collins became increasingly critical. Hodges' ability to coordinate large formations, anticipate logistical challenges, and maintain overall strategic focus ensured that the American advance remained coherent, even as individual units encountered unexpected resistance or became isolated. Collins' insistence on reconnaissance and forward momentum kept the Germans guessing, forcing them to respond to an adversary that refused to pause, a principle that proved invaluable in navigating such a dense and dangerous battlefield. Their combined leadership created a dynamic tension that mirrored the chaos of the forest itself, providing both structure and adaptability, and illustrating how effective command in wartime is not solely about orders, but about the capacity to integrate personalities, experience, and judgment in the face of uncertainty. The interplay between Hodges and Collins ultimately shaped the course of the Hürtgen campaign, highlighting the importance of leadership in one of the most challenging environments of the European theater. While the forest would claim thousands of lives and test the limits of courage and endurance, it also became a stage where strategy, initiative, and human determination intersected in profound ways. Through the coordinated vision of Hodges' measured command and Collins' relentless push for forward action, the First Army was able to navigate a landscape designed to frustrate and destroy, demonstrating that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, the combination of experience, insight, and audacity could create a path through the most forbidding of battlegrounds. It was this partnership, forged under the pressure of necessity, that would guide the American forces through the green inferno of Hürtgen, leaving a legacy of leadership lessons that resonate far beyond the battlefield itself. As the first rays of September 1944 filtered through the dense canopy of the Hürtgen Forest, The 9th Infantry Division moved cautiously into what would become one of the most grueling campaigns of the war. Stepping onto German soil for the very first time, these soldiers were no strangers to combat. Their experience had been forged in the deserts of North Africa, where sand and heat had tested endurance and strategy alike, and later in the hedgerows of France, where urban combat and entrenched positions had demanded ingenuity and courage at every turn. Yet despite their battle-hardened reputation, nothing in their training or prior experience could fully prepare them for the unique and relentless challenges posed by the forest that now lay ahead. The terrain itself was a formidable adversary, each tree a potential shelter for the enemy, each slope or ridge concealing hidden dangers, and the thick undergrowth obstructing movement. Communication and sightlines. The forest transformed even the simplest maneuvers into tactical puzzles, and the soldiers quickly realized that survival depended on their ability to adapt to an environment that seemed almost alive in its hostility. The regiments entering the forest, the 39th, 47th, and 60th, were seasoned veterans, their ranks thinned but resolute, carrying with them the scars and wisdom of previous campaigns. They had learned the value of cohesion and discipline under fire, and yet in the Hürtgen Forest, the rules of engagement were rewritten by nature itself. Mines lay buried beneath fallen leaves, machine gun nests were hidden behind natural cover, and the undulating terrain made it nearly impossible for artillery support to be effective. Communication lines faltered. Radios often failed under the dense foliage, forcing officers and soldiers to rely on hand signals and shouted commands that risked drawing enemy fire. Even the most meticulously planned operations required constant improvisation as units encountered unforeseen obstacles. From felled trees blocking narrow paths to sudden ambushes that turned seemingly safe approaches into deadly traps. The forest was a testing ground of patience, strategy, and endurance, demanding both individual initiative and unwavering trust in one's comrades. The psychological toll on the soldiers was as severe as the physical dangers. Entering the forest was like stepping into another world, one where visibility was restricted to a few meters in any direction. The sunlight filtered weakly through the canopy, and every sound snapped branch, rustling leaves, distant gunfire carried a weight of uncertainty. The 9th Infantry Division quickly learned that fear was not only a natural response but a constant companion, one that could not be ignored if the men were to maintain focus and cohesion. Commanders had to balance pushing forward with the need to preserve their troops' morale, and soldiers relied heavily on each other for reassurance, protection, and coordinated action. The forest had the effect of amplifying every small victory and every minor setback, creating a sense of intense immediacy where the outcome of a single skirmish could ripple through the ranks and influence decisions for days to come. As the division advanced, they were confronted with the cunning of German defenses, carefully integrated into the natural landscape of the forest. What at first appeared as open or navigable paths were often traps, with booby traps and fortified positions hidden beneath layers of foliage and debris. The soldiers' training in North Africa had taught them to anticipate ambushes in open deserts, and the experiences in France had instilled the value of adaptability in urban and semi-urban combat. But the forest demanded a synthesis of both skills with an added layer of caution and innovation. Every patrol, every advance, and every defensive position had to be considered not only in terms of immediate tactical advantage, but also in relation to the broader, shifting dynamics of the battlefield, where the forest itself dictated the rhythm and outcome of combat. Small units often found themselves cut off, forced to rely on initiative and ingenuity to navigate both the terrain and the enemy, turning individual acts of courage into decisive elements of the overall campaign. The division's leadership played a crucial role in guiding the soldiers through this perilous landscape. Officers who had previously coordinated large-scale maneuvers in more predictable environments now had to make split-second decisions based on partial information, often under direct fire. The relationship between commanders and troops became a lifeline, as clear communication, trust, and mutual understanding were the only things keeping units from being overwhelmed by the dual threats of the forest and the enemy. Leaders had to anticipate not only the enemy's actions, but also the forest's unpredictable influence on movement and visibility, adapting orders continuously to maintain momentum and minimize casualties. In this setting, the line between strategic oversight and tactical improvisation blurred, and the soldier's ability to internalize command intent and act decisively in chaotic conditions became essential to the division's survival and progress. As days turned into weeks, the 9th Infantry Division's advance revealed the forest's true character, a green crucible where training, courage, and endurance were tested against nearly impossible odds. Casualties mounted steadily, yet the soldiers pressed forward, motivated by duty, camaraderie, and the understanding that every step deeper into the forest brought them closer to the ultimate objectives of the campaign, including key towns and strategic positions like the River dams. The forest shaped not only the battle itself, but the soldiers' experience of it, transforming familiar concepts of movement, engagement, and supply into complex, dynamic challenges. Each encounter with German defenses demanded creativity and resilience, while the relentless pressure of the environment demanded constant vigilance and adaptation. Over time, the men of the 9th Infantry Division came to see the forest as both adversary and proving ground, a harsh teacher of lessons that would resonate long after the campaign ended. In the end, the 9th Infantry Division's entry into the Hürtgen Forest exemplified the intersection of strategy, courage, and the unforgiving nature of terrain in modern warfare. It was a campaign defined not by sweeping maneuvers or grand victories, but by the day-to-day, sometimes hour-to-hour struggle to survive, advance, and adapt in the face of overwhelming challenges. The forest became a living part of the story, shaping the soldiers' actions, testing their limits, and revealing the extraordinary human capacity to endure in conditions that would have daunted even the most seasoned veterans. The experiences of the 9th Infantry Division in Hürtgen would serve as a testament to both the brutality of war and the resilience of those who face it, offering lessons in leadership, perseverance, and the intricate dance between human determination and the environment that surrounds it. The Hürtgen Forest, with its thick, towering trees and tangled undergrowth, was not merely a natural obstacle. It had been meticulously transformed into a fortress by the Germans, each element designed to exploit the terrain to devastating effect. From the moment the American forces stepped under the dense canopy, they were confronted not only by the physical difficulties of navigation, but by a labyrinth of defenses that seemed woven seamlessly into the landscape. Bunkers and pillboxes, carefully camouflaged with foliage and earth, dotted the forest at strategic points, providing overlapping fields of fire that could decimate advancing troops. Machine gun nests, often hidden behind natural cover or shallow depressions, could erupt without warning, their bullets cutting through the forest like a predatory swarm. Mines lay concealed along likely avenues of approach, waiting to inflict both physical and psychological damage on soldiers moving through the undergrowth, while the uneven terrain, crisscrossed with ridges, ravines, and fallen trees, limited the use of armored vehicles and heavy artillery, effectively neutralizing the traditional advantages of the American army. The German defenders had studied the forest extensively, understanding how to use its natural features to channel attackers into kill zones, create bottlenecks that would slow their advance and increase casualties. Every ridge, valley, and clearing was exploited to maximize defensive effectiveness, and the careful placement of obstacles meant that even minor miscalculations by the Americans could result in disastrous consequences. Soldiers moving through the forest often found themselves funneled into narrow passages, where the terrain prevented effective maneuvering and offered little protection from enemy fire. The combination of natural and man-made defenses created a psychological pressure that was as intense as the physical threat. Every step forward carried uncertainty. Every sound could signal impending danger. And the knowledge that the enemy had prepared these ambushes instilled a pervasive sense of tension and dread. For the 9th Infantry Division and other units of the 1st Army, the forest defenses demanded constant vigilance. Adaptive tactics and extraordinary coordination. Small unit leaders had to make real-time decisions that balanced aggression with caution, often under direct fire and without clear communication with higher command. The dense foliage muffled sounds and distorted perception, making it difficult to estimate the strength or disposition of enemy forces, while the Germans could observe and target the Americans from concealed positions with deadly accuracy. Artillery support, so effective in open terrain, was frequently limited by tree cover and the inability to observe impacts, and close air support was hampered by the canopy and the need to avoid friendly fire incidents. Soldiers were forced to rely on reconnaissance patrols, careful observation, and an almost instinctive understanding of cover and concealment to advance, each step a negotiation with both the environment and the enemy. The terrain itself compounded the effect of German fortifications. Narrow trails and dense underbrush slowed movement and prevented large formations from maintaining cohesion, exposing units to concentrated fire from prepared positions. Felled trees and natural obstacles became unintentional barricades, forcing soldiers into predictable lines of movement where machine guns and mortars could be devastatingly effective. Tanks, which normally provided a decisive edge in assaulting fortified positions, struggled to maneuver through the forest, their tracks bogged down by mud, roots, and fallen timber, while their limited visibility made them vulnerable to hidden anti-tank weapons. Engineers often had to clear paths manually, using axes and saws under fire, as mechanized options were either unavailable or impractical. This painstaking and dangerous work exemplified the intersection of human endurance and tactical necessity, highlighting how terrain could amplify the lethality of well-prepared defenses. The Germans' approach was strategic as much as it was physical. By integrating natural and artificial defenses, they forced the Americans to fight a battle of attrition, where every meter gained came at an extraordinary cost in lives and resources. Fortifications were not concentrated in a single line but distributed throughout the forest, allowing the defenders to trade space for time, retreating into successive strongpoints while inflicting maximum casualties. Machine gun nests were positioned to interlock fields of fire. Pillboxes covered approaches from multiple angles, and minefields were laid to slow advances and disrupt formations. Every tree could be a sniper's perch, every ditch a trap for advancing infantry, and the forest's darkness, shadowed by dense branches, provided cover for German movements that remained invisible to the Americans. The defenders' intimate knowledge of the terrain allowed them to anticipate American tactics, respond dynamically to advances, and exploit any hesitation or misstep. For the advancing U forces, the cumulative effect of terrain and fortifications was staggering. Units that had excelled in open warfare, able to leverage mobility and firepower, now found themselves constrained and exposed, forced to adapt to a conflict that demanded patience, improvisation, and extraordinary bravery. Soldiers moved deliberately, constantly scanning for hidden threats, clearing obstacles under fire, and coordinating attacks across broken lines of communication. Leadership at every level had to be vigilant, ensuring that momentum was maintained without overexposing troops, and that reconnaissance informed every maneuver. Even minor successes required careful consolidation, as the forest's defenses and the potential for counterattack meant that gains could be reversed in moments. And the cost of progress was measured not only in meters of territory, but in the lives and stamina of the men who fought to secure it. The interplay between German defenses and the forest's natural obstacles created a battlefield unlike any the Americans had faced, one where the environment itself was an active participant in combat. The dense canopy muted sounds, distorted distances, and concealed both friend and foe, while the labyrinth of trenches, pillboxes, and mines imposed relentless pressure. Soldiers who had survived the deserts of North Africa or the fields of France now confronted a new kind of war, where success depended on acute situational awareness, relentless perseverance, and the ability to adapt tactics in real time. Every advance was a negotiation with both the enemy and the forest itself, a trial of human endurance against a combined force of natural and artificial obstacles designed to halt progress at immense cost. In the Hürtgen Forest, terrain and fortifications worked in concert to create a crucible of combat that tested every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage the soldiers could muster, leaving a legacy of strategic lessons and a stark reminder of the brutal realities of war. The Hürtgen Forest was a world unto itself, a place where conventional tactics, honed through years of training and battlefield experience, often proved inadequate or disastrously lethal, and where every step forward demanded a recalibration of strategy and courage. As the American troops pushed into the dense woodland, they quickly discovered that the environment was as formidable an adversary as the German defenders themselves. The towering trees, their branches interlocking to form a near impenetrable canopy, blocked sunlight and distorted distances, making it nearly impossible to judge enemy positions or coordinate movements effectively. Paths that seemed navigable on maps or aerial reconnaissance were deceptive, often narrowing unexpectedly into choke points or ending abruptly at natural obstacles, and the undergrowth itself thick with roots, brambles, and fallen timber slowed every advance, turning even short distances into exhausting, perilous treks. Communication, always vital on the battlefield, became a constant challenge. Radios, the lifeline between frontline units and command, frequently malfunctioned under the forest's dense canopy, and the uneven terrain interfered with signals, creating isolated pockets where soldiers could not reliably call for support or relay intelligence. Messages had to be delivered by runners or improvised visual signals, each trip a gamble against concealed machine gun nests or hidden snipers. Officers, forced to make split-second decisions based on fragmentary information, had to rely heavily on their experience and intuition, while lower-ranking soldiers were expected to act independently, interpreting ambiguous orders and responding to threats in real time. The forest, in essence, neutralized much of the hierarchical command structure, creating a dynamic where initiative, improvisation, and trust between comrades became critical to survival. The terrain itself presented obstacles that rendered conventional mechanized and infantry tactics nearly impossible. Tanks, which in open fields provided overwhelming firepower and protection, struggled to navigate the narrow trails, fallen logs, and muddy ditches of the Hürtgen, often requiring engineers to manually clear a path under fire, wielding axes and saws while exposed to enemy observation. Artillery support, a cornerstone of modern combat doctrine, was similarly hampered, as the dense canopy prevented accurate targeting, and friendly forces were often too close for effective shelling without risking catastrophic casualties. Infantry formations that had been effective in the hedgerows of France or the deserts of North Africa had to be abandoned, replaced with smaller, more flexible units capable of navigating the labyrinthine terrain. And even these adaptations carried tremendous risk. Limited visibility compounded these challenges, creating an omnipresent sense of vulnerability and tension. Soldiers could see only a few meters ahead, and every sound rustling leaves, snapping branches, Distant gunfire could signal either a harmless movement of wildlife or an imminent ambush. The forest amplified sound in unpredictable ways, and echoes often distorted the location of enemy fire, making it nearly impossible to ascertain direction or distance without exposing oneself to danger. Smoke from mortars or burning underbrush further reduced visibility, and in some cases, troops advanced blindly into prelayed traps or mines. The psychological strain of this constant uncertainty weighed heavily, testing both individual resilience and unit cohesion, as men had to maintain focus and discipline under extreme stress while grappling with the ever-present knowledge that one misstep could be fatal. The Germans, acutely aware of these environmental advantages, had integrated them into their defensive strategy. Machine guns and mortars were positioned to exploit natural choke points. Sniper teams used the limited lines of sight to maximize effect, and fortified positions took advantage of ridges and depressions that would otherwise be considered obstacles. Mines were often concealed along narrow paths, forcing troops into predictable routes where defenders could concentrate fire. And every clearing that offered a potential staging area was covered by overlapping fields of fire. The combination of natural concealment and man-made fortification meant that even when soldiers overcame one obstacle, another awaited immediately, turning every gain into a costly struggle and prolonging the battle across days and weeks. For the soldiers of the 9th Infantry Division and attached units, these conditions necessitated a profound shift in mindset and tactics. Traditional doctrines of advance, cover, and fire had to be modified or abandoned altogether in favor of highly adaptive, situationally driven approaches. Leaders relied heavily on reconnaissance patrols to gather local intelligence. Yet these patrols were themselves perilous, often resulting in heavy casualties. Coordination between units required extraordinary ingenuity, using hand signals, runners, and sporadic radio bursts to synchronize movements while remaining under threat from concealed fire. Even logistical support, moving ammunition, rations, and medical supplies became a Herculean task, as supply lines were continually disrupted by the forest's obstacles and enemy action, forcing improvisation at every level. Despite these overwhelming challenges, the soldiers pressed forward, driven by discipline, camaraderie, and an understanding of the broader strategic imperative to secure key objectives such as the town of Schmidt and the Ruhr River dams. Each step through the forest was a negotiation with both the enemy and the environment, where small victories securing a ridge, clearing a minefield, rescuing wounded comrades were celebrated amidst relentless adversity. The forest transformed every engagement into a microcosm of attrition and endurance, testing not only physical capabilities but also morale, ingenuity, and leadership under pressure. Every advance was a testament to human resilience, as the men adapted to an environment designed to frustrate, injure, and kill, learning to navigate, communicate, and fight in a space where conventional methods were not merely ineffective, but deadly. In the end, the Hürtgen Forest was a crucible in which the conventional wisdom of military tactics collided with the unpredictable realities of terrain. Visibility and communication failure, the dense canopy, malfunctioning radios, and impassable trails created conditions where training alone could not guarantee survival, and where success depended on adaptability, coordination, and courage under extreme duress. Each soldier's experience was shaped not only by enemy fire but by the forest itself, a relentless force that tested every skill and decision to the limits. The campaign illustrated in stark detail how environment, when combined with human ingenuity and fortification, could dictate the rhythm, cost, and outcome of battle, leaving an enduring lesson on the interplay between strategy, terrain, and the unyielding realities of war. As the American forces pressed deeper into the Hürtgen Forest, the strategic significance of their objectives became increasingly clear. And nowhere was this more evident than in the struggle to capture the town of Schmidt. Nestled at a critical junction within the forest, Schmidt was not simply another waypoint along the road to the Ruhr River. It was a linchpin for both sides, a crossroads that controlled movement, communications, and supply lines in a region already complicated by dense woods and treacherous terrain. For the Americans, taking Schmidt was essential to advance toward the Ruhr River dams, whose destruction by German forces could unleash devastating floods. Isolating troops, severing supply routes, and stalling the Allied push into Germany. The stakes were immense. Every meter of ground gained in Schmidt represented a potential breakthrough, yet every step was fraught with peril, as the town was heavily fortified and defended by an enemy intimately familiar with the forest's intricacies. The 9th Infantry Division, already battle-hardened from campaigns across North Africa and France, faced the daunting task of penetrating German defensive lines under conditions that magnified the difficulties of any engagement. The forest surrounding Schmidt acted as a natural force multiplier for the Germans, providing cover for snipers, machine gun nests, and artillery positions, while the town itself had been reinforced with bunkers, pillboxes, and obstacles designed to slow any advancing force. Mines were strategically placed along the approaches, turning even minor maneuvers into life-threatening endeavors. Every building, every street, and even rubble-strewn clearings became potential kill zones. The combination of natural and man-made defenses meant that conventional tactics, effective elsewhere, were severely constrained, forcing commanders and soldiers alike to rely on adaptability, intuition, and extraordinary courage to advance. From the moment the Americans approached Schmidt, the psychological pressure of the mission was palpable. Soldiers were aware that the success of the campaign and the prevention of catastrophic flooding downstream depended on their ability to secure the town quickly. Yet the forest and enemy defenses conspired to slow every move. Units had to navigate narrow, treacherous trails, often under intermittent fire, while maintaining cohesion and communication in a terrain that constantly disrupted both. Radios, vital for coordinating movements and requesting support, were unreliable beneath the dense canopy, forcing officers to improvise, use runners, or rely on hand signals under dangerous circumstances. Each decision carried weighty consequences. A poorly timed assault could result in severe casualties, while hesitation could allow the Germans to reinforce positions or sabotage critical infrastructure, like the Ruhr River dams. Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges and his staff understood the stakes, as did Lieutenant General Lightning Joe Collins, whose experience and insistence on rapid reconnaissance and forward momentum provided crucial guidance. Reconnaissance teams moved cautiously through the forest, identifying enemy positions, minefields, and fortified strongpoints, their observations forming the basis for carefully coordinated assaults. Small unit leaders were granted considerable discretion, often making split-second tactical choices that balanced aggression with the need to conserve manpower. The interplay of strategy and improvisation was critical. The dense forest and fortified town left little room for error, and every advance required a combination of deliberate planning and adaptive action on the part of soldiers navigating a landscape designed to punish mistakes. The capture of Schmidt was not merely a tactical necessity. It was also a strategic imperative that required pinning German forces and preventing them from shifting troops to other fronts. By fixing enemy divisions in place, the Americans sought to alleviate pressure on other operations further north, particularly in the Battle of Hürtgen, and to maintain momentum toward Berlin. The town's position provided both a staging ground for subsequent offensives and a psychological blow to German defenders, signaling that the Allies were capable of penetrating even the most formidable natural and fortified barriers. Soldiers who entered Schmidt faced the dual challenges of urban combat and forested approaches. where every street corner, building, and alley could conceal a well-prepared enemy. The Americans had to advance carefully, often clearing block by block, while engineers and sappers worked to neutralize mines and obstacles that could halt momentum or inflict heavy casualties. Securing access to the Ruhr River dams was another critical dimension of the operation. German control of these structures threatened to unleash massive floods, which would have disrupted communications, immobilized vehicles, and created deadly hazards for troops and civilians alike. Engineers and assault units were tasked with both advancing through the forest and ensuring that the dams remained intact, a delicate balance that required foresight, coordination, and rapid response to German sabotage efforts. The dual objectives of capturing Schmidt and protecting the dams created operational complexity, forcing commanders to prioritize resources, adapt to evolving threats, and manage the exhaustion and morale of their troops under grueling conditions. The campaign became a constant negotiation between aggression and prudence, risk and reward, as every hour of delay or misstep could have catastrophic consequences. The battle for Schmidt was also characterized by a relentless cycle of attack and counterattack, as German forces, although outnumbered, leveraged their intimate knowledge of the terrain and fortified positions to strike with precision and intensity. The Americans had to adapt to the fluid nature of the engagement, learning to anticipate ambushes, coordinate artillery and infantry support under limited visibility, and maintain supply lines in a forest that resisted both movement and observation. Casualties mounted. Yet every incremental gain brought the Allies closer to their strategic goal, reinforcing the importance of perseverance, coordination, and morale. Soldiers were tested not only physically but psychologically, as the forest and town combined to create an environment of unrelenting stress, where each advance was both an achievement and a reminder of the perils that surrounded them. Through careful planning, courageous execution, and adaptive leadership, the American forces gradually achieved their objectives, securing Schmidt and pinning German troops in the surrounding forest, while ensuring that the Ruhr River dams remained under Allied control. These achievements allowed the First Army to maintain momentum, advance toward the Rhine, and contribute to the broader strategy of bringing the war in Europe to a close. The operation illustrated the interplay of terrain, fortification, strategy, and human endurance, highlighting how a single town within a dense forest could become the focal point of a critical campaign. The struggle for Schmidt serves as a testament to the courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice of the soldiers involved, and underscores the complex realities of warfare where every meter gained is hard-won, and every decision carries profound consequences. The capture of Schmidt and protection of the Ruhr River dams remain enduring examples of the fusion of tactical necessity and strategic foresight, demonstrating how leadership, adaptability, and relentless determination can overcome even the most formidable natural and man-made obstacles, and how the courage of individual soldiers contributes to the broader arc of history, shaping the outcome of campaigns. Ultimately, the course of nations. The Hürtgen Forest had earned a grim reputation long before the first American troops fully realized the scale of the ordeal that awaited them. And as they pressed forward, the forest quickly lived up to that terrifying nickname, a meat grinder. Soldiers found themselves in a relentless struggle where each meter of progress demanded enormous sacrifice. And the combination of mines, artillery, and even the forest itself turned every step into a battle against death itself. Unlike open battlefields where formations could maneuver and cover could be coordinated, the forest magnified every danger. Mines, meticulously laid along narrow paths, created sudden explosions that shredded men and equipment alike, turning familiar trails into unpredictable death traps. These hidden devices, often camouflaged with leaves, dirt, or underbrush, left no room for hesitation. A single misstep could instantly remove a soldier from the fight, and the carnage was compounded by the difficulty of evacuating the wounded through terrain that often forced stretcher-bearers to navigate tangled routes and dense vegetation while under fire. Artillery, while capable of inflicting devastating damage, also had an unpredictable and deadly effect in the forest. Explosive shells detonated among the trees sent shrapnel ricocheting in every direction, often striking friendly forces as easily as enemy positions. Tree limbs and debris acted like secondary projectiles, amplifying the hazards of each barrage, creating a situation where the very forest that provided cover also became a weapon. Soldiers described the experience as walking into a tunnel of fire, where the sky was hidden, the air thick with smoke and dust, and death seemed to strike from both above and below. Mortars, machine gun nests, and hidden pillboxes added further complexity, producing a relentless cacophony of explosions, gunfire, and shouted orders, a soundscape that blurred time and heightened the sense of isolation, making it almost impossible to distinguish friend from foe or to gauge the safety of any given advance. Amid this relentless violence, temporary ceasefires emerged as critical yet fragile respites. Commanders recognized that the intensity of the combat, coupled with the forest's lethal environment, necessitated periodic pauses to evacuate the wounded and recover the fallen. These brief interludes, though sometimes lasting only hours, provided the soldiers a rare opportunity to tend to their comrades, reinforce morale, and regroup for the next phase of the operation. Medics, often under fire themselves, worked tirelessly to drag men from the battlefield, administer life-saving treatment, and stabilize those who could be transported to field hospitals. It was during these fleeting moments of calm that the human cost of the battle became starkly visible. Limbs mangled by mines, bodies scarred by shrapnel, and faces etched with exhaustion and fear. The temporary ceasefires were a testament to the soldiers' resilience and to the necessity of preserving life amidst the chaos of relentless combat. Yet they also underscored the futility of the larger tactical situation, where every day brought renewed peril and substantial losses. The Americans' approach to the Hürtgen Forest revealed both the courage and the strain of troops caught in an environment that defied conventional planning. Units moved forward under orders to maintain momentum, often without clear understanding of the terrain ahead or the strength of enemy defenses. The forest's dense canopy and tangled undergrowth created an ever-present sense of vulnerability, where sniper fire could emerge from unseen angles, machine guns could pin down entire squads, and artillery rounds could explode with lethal randomness. Each soldier had to navigate not only the physical obstacles, but also the mental strain of constant exposure to death, the unpredictability of the enemy, and the relentless pressure to advance. Leadership at every level was tested, as small unit commanders had to balance aggressive tactics with the preservation of life, often improvising under fire and making decisions with incomplete information, while the soldiers relied on training, instinct, and camaraderie to survive. The combination of natural hazards, fortifications, and relentless enemy fire made every engagement a miniature siege, where progress was measured in yards rather than miles, and success often meant simply surviving until reinforcements could be brought forward. The meat-grinder nature of the forest meant that American forces had to endure staggering casualties. Yet even as losses mounted, the soldiers pressed onward, driven by discipline, duty, and the understanding that strategic objectives, including Schmidt and the Ruhr River dams, could not be deferred. The forest transformed ordinary combat into a protracted ordeal, where the line between heroism and survival blurred, and where acts of bravery were both frequent and tragic, leaving indelible marks on the men who survived. Despite the harrowing conditions, soldiers found moments of humanity amidst the chaos, often during the temporary ceasefires. Medics, engineers, and fellow troops worked tirelessly to aid the wounded. Sharing rations, providing comfort, and ensuring that no soldier was abandoned to the forest's merciless grasp. These acts of compassion, performed under the most extreme conditions, underscored the resilience of the human spirit and the bonds forged in combat. Each rescue, each effort to stabilize a comrade, became an assertion of life against the backdrop of the forest's overwhelming destructiveness. A reminder that even in a meat grinder, courage and humanity could persist. The battle's intensity also forced commanders to re-evaluate tactics and logistics in real time, learning to integrate reconnaissance, small unit coordination, and careful use of artillery and armor to mitigate losses. While mistakes were made, and the cost in lives was staggering, the American forces adapted to the forest's unique challenges, developing methods to navigate the treacherous terrain, communicate under adverse conditions, and maintain offensive pressure despite the relentless attrition. This iterative process highlighted the intersection of leadership, strategy, and resilience, illustrating how a capable army responds to an environment designed to confound and destroy it. Ultimately, the Hürtgen Forest left a legacy defined by sacrifice, endurance, and the extraordinary challenges of warfare in extreme conditions. The meat grinder became more than a nickname. It encapsulated the staggering human cost, the tactical complexity, and the perseverance required to achieve objectives in an environment where nature itself was an adversary. Temporary ceasefires, while brief and limited, offered a lifeline to the wounded and a moment to witness acts of courage and compassion that contrasted sharply with the surrounding devastation. The forest was an unforgiving teacher, demanding courage, ingenuity, and tenacity, and it revealed in stark terms the brutal realities of combat when terrain, fortification, and human determination collided with devastating effect. In this crucible, the soldiers of the 9th Infantry Division and attached units endured, adapted, and pressed forward, leaving a lasting testament to human resilience amidst the horrors of war. As September 1944 unfolded, the American forces found themselves locked in a grueling campaign that would stretch deep into the winter months. A protracted struggle against an enemy entrenched in the Hürtgen Forest that defied conventional measures of progress. From the very beginning, the forest demanded a meticulous, almost painstaking approach. Every step forward was an exercise in patience, courage, and endurance, as the soldiers confronted dense undergrowth, hidden mines, and fortified German positions that turned even the simplest maneuver into a deadly challenge. Each regiment knew that the cost of advancement would be steep, and yet the pressure from command to maintain momentum drove them relentlessly onward. A relentless push that would define the months ahead. The early autumn attacks were cautious, deliberate, and marked by incremental gains that often seemed to vanish as quickly as they were achieved. Soldiers and commanders alike grappled with the forest's treacherous terrain, where mud, fallen trees, and narrow paths limited movement, slowed reinforcements, and made supply lines vulnerable to German ambushes. These conditions magnified the inherent dangers of combat, ensuring that every minor victory came at a disproportionate cost. As the 9th Infantry Division pressed forward, they faced an enemy well versed in the art of defensive warfare, fortified behind bunkers, pillboxes, and machine gun nests, all interconnected by concealed paths and supported by artillery that rained destruction into the forest with deadly precision. The Americans' objective was not simply to survive but to capture key positions, hold strategic towns like Schmidt, and secure access to the Ruhr River dams. Objectives that were both vital and extraordinarily difficult to attain under the conditions. October and November saw the intensity of the conflict escalate dramatically, with each assault exposing soldiers to relentless hazards. Mines concealed under leaves and brush claimed men with terrifying regularity, while German sharpshooters and machine gunners exploited the dense forest to devastating effect. Units that had advanced over long stretches of ground found themselves pushed back by counterattacks, illustrating the fluid, precarious nature of the battle. Casualties mounted at an alarming rate, and yet the imperative to maintain pressure did not relent. Soldiers adapted to the forest's lethal environment with ingenuity and resolve, using hand signals, careful reconnaissance, and coordinated small unit tactics to minimize exposure and maximize the limited advantages they could gain. Temporary ceasefires were used sparingly to evacuate the wounded and recover bodies, underscoring the grim reality that even minor operational pauses were fraught with peril, as enemy fire and the treacherous terrain made each movement a potential death sentence. Operation Queen, launched in mid-November, represented a concerted effort to break through the forest and achieve more decisive gains. It was a massive undertaking, combining infantry, artillery, and armored divisions in a coordinated push against German defenses that had become increasingly entrenched. The operation showcased both the scale of American ambition and the severity of the challenges imposed by the forest. Tanks, which might have been decisive on open ground, struggled in the dense woods, often halted by fallen trees or booby-traps. Infantrymen were forced to clear paths, chop down obstacles, and confront enemy fortifications with close-quarters combat, process that consumed time, energy, and lives. Progress was measured in yards, not miles, and each advance was met with fierce resistance, leaving commanders to weigh the value of every strategic objective against the mounting human cost. The forest became a crucible in which leadership, courage, and endurance were tested daily, as the soldiers confronted a relentless enemy and a landscape designed to frustrate and destroy them. Winter intensified the struggle, as freezing temperatures and heavy snow compounded the forest's natural difficulties. Soldiers contended not only with German fire but with frostbite, exhaustion, and the logistical nightmare of supplying men and material across impassable terrain. The incremental nature of the attacks continued, with gains made at great cost frequently reversed by counterattacks or the sheer difficulty of holding positions under constant pressure. Supply lines were stretched thin, and the forest's concealment allowed German forces to strike unexpectedly, inflicting casualties and undermining American advances. Even the most seasoned units, hardened through campaigns in North Africa and France, faced the forest's unforgiving nature, learning that previous experience offered little preparation for the unique challenges of Hürtgen. As the months wore on, the cumulative toll became staggering. American forces endured thousands of casualties, with men killed, wounded, or missing at alarming rates. Yet the imperative to secure strategic objectives and maintain pressure on the German defenses remained paramount. Each regiment adapted to the forest in its own way, learning to combine patience with aggression, improvisation with discipline, and resilience with tactical ingenuity. Temporary ceasefires continued to provide brief relief, allowing medics to evacuate the wounded and soldiers to regroup. But the overarching pattern of slow, costly gains persisted. Victory was elusive, and every advance demanded extraordinary human effort against an adversary determined to defend its homeland. The incremental attacks, extending from September 1944 through February 1945, highlighted the brutal arithmetic of attrition in the Hürtgen Forest. Gains were achieved at tremendous cost, and the nature of the combat meant that territory taken could easily be lost again, reflecting the challenges of fighting in a terrain where conventional tactics were often ineffective. The forest imposed a unique discipline, forcing soldiers and commanders to innovate constantly, assess risks with precision, and maintain morale under conditions that were as psychologically taxing as they were physically demanding. Operation Queen, while representing a concentrated effort to achieve breakthrough, ultimately exemplified the broader struggle, progress measured in painstaking increments, victories shadowed by loss, and the relentless drive to advance despite the unforgiving environment. By February 1945, the Americans had begun to consolidate their hold on sections of the forest. Yet the legacy of these months of incremental attacks remained vivid. The campaign had tested every facet of military capability, from leadership and planning to endurance and adaptation under fire. The Hürtgen Forest, with its dense trees, fortified positions, and little terrain, had exacted a heavy price, but it also revealed the extraordinary capacity of soldiers to endure, adapt, and persist in the face of near impossible odds. The lessons of these months: the importance of preparation, the cost of underestimating terrain, and the resilience of human spirit under relentless adversity would echo long after the guns fell silent, leaving an indelible mark on those who survived and on the history of World War II. As February 1945 dawned, the Hürtgen Forest, long a crucible of pain, endurance, and unrelenting combat, finally began to yield to the relentless efforts of the American forces. The dense, tangled woods that had claimed tens of thousands of lives, shredded units, and tested even the most seasoned soldiers were gradually cleared, allowing the Allies to consolidate their positions and prepare for the next stages of the advance into Germany. For the men who had survived months of grueling combat, the forest was more than just a battlefield. It was a teacher, a harsh mentor that imparted lessons in resilience, tactical adaptation, and the human cost of strategic decisions. Each yard gained had been paid for in sweat, blood, and unimaginable sacrifice, a stark reminder of the stakes of war and the price of perseverance. By the time the forest was finally secured, estimates suggest that between 35,000 and 60,000 soldiers had been killed, wounded, or gone missing, a staggering toll that underscores the brutal reality of combat in such unforgiving terrain. These numbers, cold on paper, represent thousands of individual stories: men separated from their units, friends lost in moments of chaos, medics navigating gunfire and artillery to reach the wounded, and commanders struggling to balance the necessity of objectives with the lives of those under their command. The Hürtgen campaign was a battlefield of attrition, where the forest itself became a weapon, and each skirmish, each assault, was fought not just against the enemy, but against the terrain, the elements, and exhaustion that wore down even the strongest men. The capture of the forest was not merely a tactical success. It opened the path to the Ruhr River and set the stage for further Allied operations toward the heart of Germany. With the forest behind them, the Americans could better coordinate artillery, armor, and infantry to push toward Cologne and beyond, applying pressure that would hasten the final collapse of Nazi defenses in Western Europe. Yet the campaign left a lasting imprint on all who participated, a profound awareness of the complexities of warfare, the dangers of underestimating both the enemy and the environment, and the extraordinary resilience required to endure relentless adversity. The lessons of Hürtgen extend beyond the immediate military outcomes. They illustrate the importance of terrain in shaping strategy, the necessity of adaptability in leadership, and the human dimension of conflict. Officers like General Courtney Hodges and Lieutenant General Joe Collins learned firsthand that experience, courage, and tactical brilliance could not completely mitigate the horrors of dense, fortified forests. Yet their perseverance under extreme pressure remains a testament to the enduring spirit of those who lead and fight in war. The soldiers' ingenuity finding ways to navigate impassable areas, coordinating attacks under constant fire, And improvising to survive reflects the capacity of humans to adapt and endure even when conventional methods fail. For historians and military strategists, Hürtgen serves as both a warning and a guide. It demonstrates that even with numerical superiority, poorly understood terrain and well-prepared defenders can turn any campaign into a costly quagmire. The battle also shows the ethical dimensions of command, the heavy burden of responsibility when lives are expended for objectives that are difficult to justify in immediate terms, and the resilience required to maintain morale under seemingly hopeless circumstances. Each story from Hürtgen, the young infantryman navigating minefields, the medic rushing to aid the wounded, the commander grappling with split-second decisions, adds depth to our understanding of warfare and human endurance. Yet, amidst the grim statistics and strategic reflections, there is a narrative of courage, solidarity, and unwavering commitment. The men who endured the Hürtgen Forest exemplified the human capacity to face overwhelming odds with determination. They forged bonds in adversity, relied on one another for survival, and demonstrated the tenacity of spirit that defines remarkable military campaigns. Their experiences, though painful, contributed to the broader Allied success in Europe, shaping the final months of the war and leaving lessons that resonate in military academies and historical studies to this day. As we reflect on the Hürtgen Forest, it is essential to remember the sacrifices made, the lives altered forever, and the enduring lessons in strategy, leadership, and human resilience. The forest, once a theater of chaos and suffering, stands as a testament to both the horrors of war and the extraordinary capacity of individuals to endure, adapt, and overcome. Every soldier who survived carried forward the memory of their fallen comrades, the knowledge of the sacrifices made, and the understanding that courage, ingenuity, and determination could prevail even in the most harrowing circumstances. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of the most challenging battles of World War II. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support more in-depth explorations of history's defining moments. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive and honors those who lived them. Wishing you a peaceful night, filled with reflection and gratitude. And for all our viewers, good night and sleep well.